Once upon a time, in an American dream far, far away, the Disney family used their imaginations to script their own legend. Not just in films and beloved theme parks, but also by granting us a spellbinding performance in the unforgiving theatre of business bravado. Indeed, just a few short years after the cinematic birth of their cherished character, Mickey Mouse, and the release of the seminal classic Snow White, the Disney family found their company on the very edge of financial abyss. Yet, they were shockingly able to bounce back, resurrect their now hallowed cultural institution out of the ether, and transform a once simple animated film studio into America's most iconic brand. In today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we'll share with you the full saga of the Disney family, a story of bodacious brushstrokes and bold boardroom duels. It's a chronicle of artistic genius pushing past the pain of poverty, forging a creative home where dreams are made, childhoods are uplifted, and families are brought closer together, one character at a time. In the bucolic expanses of County Kilkenny, Ireland, during the early 1800s, Disney, the name that would come to farm the hearts and minds of millions of families around the world, was originally home to a brood of humble landowners. The family name, originally Désigny and translated to English as from Isigny, is of Norman French derivation, coming from the town of Isigny-sur-Mer. The Disneys, among others descended from Normans, settled in England and gave their name to Norton Disney in Lincolnshire. However, some of the family moved to Ireland around the 11th century. Thus, the first notable Disney in history was Arundel Elias Disney, Walt Disney's great-grandfather. Arundel Elias would spend his early years in Ireland before eventually joining his brother Robert in Liverpool and setting sail for Ontario, Canada. In Canada, Arundel Elias Disney's son Keppel found love with an Irish-Canadian, Mary Richardson. Their son, Elias Disney, was born in 1859 in the rural village of Bluevale, Ontario, and Elias would later become the father of the iconic Walt Disney. In 1878, the family left Canada and moved to Ellis, Kansas, in pursuit of the American dream. The exact motives for this move remain a well-kept family secret, but it likely involved seeking new opportunities. Then, on the 5th of December, 1901, in Chicago, Illinois, Walt Disney was born to Elias and Flora Disney. Walt was the latest addition to a growing family that would soon include a sister, Ruth. Little did anyone suspect that this baby would one day trade his rattle for a film reel and a kingdom of animated fantasies. By 1906, the Disney family was yearning for quieter pastures and relocated to Marceline, Missouri. This rural idyll, with its flora and fauna, did not have any Disneyland-like castles, yet Marceline nurtured young Walt's artistic tendencies, and its verdant setting became an incubator for his vivid imagination. Indeed, Grandma Disney, Uncle Mike, and Civil War veterans fed him a rich diet of stories and local color. After his stint as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross in France during World War I, Walt Disney returned stateside and apprenticed at a commercial art studio in Kansas City. Driven by a vision and an entrepreneurial spirit, he, along with his brother Roy, inaugurated their own venture, Laugh-O-Gram Studios, in 1920. This initial foray into the cartoon world, however, faltered, and the studio folded just a few years into its operation. Undeterred by the collapse of his first business, Disney voyaged to Los Angeles with a modest sum and ambitions of becoming an actor. The Disney brothers pooled their funds, which included a borrowed $500 from the family, and ingeniously rigged up a camera stand right in their uncle's garage. Yet the path to success was fraught with hurdles. Walt faced a barrage of rejections and teetered on the edge of financial precarity. In fact, his groundbreaking idea for Mickey Mouse was dismissed time and again, over 300 times. Yet with each stroke of his pencil, young Walt Disney would draw himself further into a world of his own creation. A world that would one day become synonymous with childhood itself. And then, with an opportunity as sudden as it was serendipitous, the scene was set for young Walt to take an extraordinary leap into the unknown. When the Disney brothers inked their inaugural contract with a Hollywood real estate office's back room as their workspace, little did they know they were laying the cornerstone for an entertainment colossus. With a humble $500 loan, courtesy of a familial benefactor, and a maiden paycheck from Winkler Pictures, Walt, the visionary doodler, and Roy, the numbers whiz, embarked on an adventure in motion and mirth. Now their first foray was a charming series of shorts featuring a plucky girl named Alice. These animated gems were sufficient to usher the Disneys out of their cramped quarters and into a shiny new workshop, later planting their flag on Hyperion Street, a site destined to become synonymous with the Disney name. Leap ahead 5 years to 1928 and cue the entrance of a certain mouse that would skitter into the hearts of millions. Mickey, with his wide-eyed wonder, didn't just scurry onto the scene. He arrived with a bang in Steamboat Willie, tapping his feet to the beat of innovation with synchronized sound. Before this star turn, Oswald the Rabbit hopped into Disney's world, but bounded out just as quickly, courtesy of a contractual snag. Indeed, Mickey's first outing, a silent flick titled Plain Crazy, barely caused a ripple, but once he found his voice, literally and figuratively, everything changed. Mickey's everyman appeal, shaped and smoothed from his earlier brasher version, proved irresistible, especially to his pint-sized audience. Walt Disney's ambition, however, was not for the short-sighted. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, his 1937 tour de force, wove its spell with an unprecedented palette and a harmonic backdrop that would resonate long after the theatre lights lifted. But the wizardry wasn't confined to the screen. It spilled into the toy shops and children's rooms a full year before the film's premiere, thanks to the pioneering promotional wizardry of Kay Kamen. And Snow White didn't just make a splash, it made waves, to the resounding tune of $8 million in its opening act alone, setting the stage for what animation could aspire to be. The film's Luca laid the golden bricks to Disney's Burbank bastion, a move that signified more than just a change of address. It was a monumental leap into a future where art and innovation would dance hand in hand, under one roof designed to nurture both. And from the get-go, the Burbank studio was no run-of-the-mill lot. It was a visionary's playground, complete with underground tunnels, a feature that perhaps even the gnomes and fairies of Disney's realms would nod at approvingly. And within these walls, Walt Disney himself pulled the strings of his ever-expanding fantasy world until his last day in 1966. The Burbank studio's rise, hand in hand with the triumph of Snow White, wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was a well-scripted saga of persistence, creativity, and let's face it, a bit of pixie dust in the ledger books. However, despite the initial windfall that Snow White provided, the financial fairy tale did not continue unabated. The infusion of capital from Snow White's success was quickly offset by the immense costs of subsequent projects and an ambitious studio expansion. These endeavors, while visionary, strained the studio's finances to the breaking point, plunging Disney into substantial debt. The war years added to this financial strain, cutting off European markets and imposing funding shortages for new productions. Indeed, the once flush studio found itself navigating a precarious financial landscape, with the pressure to produce another hit growing ever more urgent. But, in a dashing rescue worthy of its own silver screen adaptation, Walt Disney Studios, having flirted with disaster to the tune of $4 million in post-war debt, found a hero in an unlikely form, a glass slipper-wearing fairy godmother befriended Cinderella. Cinderella waltzed into theaters in February 1950, her ball gown swirling to the rhythm of cash registers ringing up a storm. The film raked in a princely sum of $52.4 million at the time, a figure that today's fairy tale bean counters translates to over $600 million. But this story's happy ending wasn't penned solely by ticket sales. An entourage of themed merchandise, ranging from elegant gowns to playtime dolls, also bolstered the studio's war chest. Thus, the windfall from Cinderella did more than just settle a few debts. It set Disney on a path to become an entertainment leviathan. Flush with funds, the studio queued up a lineup of new productions, opened its own distribution arm, and dipped its toes into the burgeoning waters of television production. Indeed, this Cinderella effect was no midnight magic. It was a bona fide renaissance for the studio in the 1950s. But, in the shadows of this success, a bold blueprint for a magical realm was taking shape, a dream so daring it promised to eclipse everything the Disney family had done before. Now, not one to rest on his laurels, Walt Disney, 5 years post-Cinderella, set his sights on a venture of even greater ambition, a theme park coined Disneyland. Naysayers were quick to dismiss it as Walt's Folly, a nickname that seemed all too apt on that infamous opening day in July 1955. A bevy of counterfeit tickets, melting asphalt and ride malfunctions may have made it seem that the park was courting disaster rather than delight. Yet, despite a start that could easily be categorized as not ideal, Disneyland emerged as a trailblazer in the world of amusement, planting the flag for the future Disney Parks empire. The park, like a storybook hero, rose from its shaky beginnings to charm audiences worldwide, drawing 1 million visitors within 10 weeks and escalating to 5 million annual visitors by the dawn of the 1960s. Certainly, Disneyland's success crowned the studio's financial resurgence that began with the triumph of Cinderella. Rolling into the 1970s, America found Diane Disney Miller, Walt's elder child, ensconced in a life dedicated to family and philanthropy. Her heart led her to Ron Miller on a serendipitous blind date. Their partnership extended beyond romance to a bustling household of 7 and a venture into the wine country of Napa Valley. And Diane's legacy, like her father's, would be marked by her philanthropic endeavors, which included founding the Walt Disney Family Museum and championing the arts, most notably through her instrumental role in bringing the Walt Disney Concert Hall to life. And then there was Roy E. Disney, the nephew of Walt, carving his own niche in the company as a senior executive. Although initially drawn to engineering, Roy found his true passion within the family empire, contributing to the True Life Adventures series and holding the animation studio's reins when needed. The 1970s, while not the best of times for Disney movies, witnessed Roy E. Disney wielding his influence and insight, not as a clock-watching executive, but as a creative force, ensuring the legacy of his family's name and the magic of Disney remained alive for future generations to enjoy. But as the final note of the 70s melody faded, a new conductor was poised at the Disney's orchestra's helm. The stage was set for Michael Eisner, whose hands would soon steer the storied enterprise through turbulent yet transformative waters and craft a future where the magic was to be not just sustained, but spectacularly reimagined. Settling into the 1980s, we first encounter Ron Miller, Walt's son-in-law and a man of many hats, NFL player turned Disney CEO pre-Eisner. Under his watch, the company cautiously ventured into uncharted territories, not only by launching Touchstone films to broaden its cinematic horizons, but also by inaugurating the Disney Channel in 1983, both carving new avenues for Disney's creative expression. And the in-law, Miller, proved to be a pioneer, boldly backing early ventures into computer animation with groundbreaking titles like Tron, providing patronage to a fledgling Tim Burton for his unique stop-motion animations, Vincent and Frankenweenie, and laying groundwork for what would become cultural touchstones such as Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Yet, for all his forward passes, the former football player Miller's tenure saw Disney on the defensive against corporate raiders, leaving some stakeholders grumbling on the sidelines. In 1984, the winds of change swept through Disney once more, as Roy E. Disney, along with Stanley Gold and influential shareholder Sid Bass, decided the time had come for new leadership. They eventually orchestrated a coup that saw Miller make way for a fresh-faced leadership trio, Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who would steer the Disney ship into both prosperous and choppy waters. Now, in a tenure sprinkled with as much fairy dust as controversy, Michael Eisner's ride as the Grand Sorcerer atop the Walt Disney Company's empire from the autumn of 1984 until the leaves began to fall in 2005 unfolded like a theme park ride. Eisner, playing the role of the rejuvenator, took Disney's somewhat dusty throne and polished it to a shine that dazzled Wall Street and Main Street alike. He nudged the iconic Mouse House into the modern era, endowing it with a sparkle and verve it hadn't seen in 2 decades. Yet, as in any good Disney narrative, there was a twist. The later chapters of Eisner's reign were ruffled by a cacophony of dissent from the ranks and rumblings of discontent from the founding family itself. Ambitious pursuits like the Euro Disney Adventure, later rebranded as Disneyland Paris, and a leap into television with the acquisition of Fox Family turned into billion-dollar thorns in Eisner's side. Critics howled over what they saw as lavish and reckless investments, and disgruntled employees grew weary. And the Magical Kingdom's 401k plan participants cast a spell of their own, a majority voicing no confidence in the CEO's re-election. As the digital clock ticked into the 21st century, Roy Disney, in one final dramatic act, decided to play hero in his own right. Resigning to rally the troops, he launched a second Save Disney campaign, an online crusade against the company's own narrative, calling for another change in leadership and governance. And his campaign wasn't for naught. In a resolution befitting a Disney tale, Roy ended his battle and returned to the company as a sage director emeritus, with peace restored in the kingdom. And finally, in a tribute to the original patriarch, 2009 saw the opening of the Walt Disney Family Museum. Diane Disney Miller, a key keeper of the Disney flame, chose the Presidio of San Francisco as the setting for a museum dedicated to her father's storied saga. This space wasn't just a gallery of memories, but an interactive showcase designed to echo Walt's ethos as a pioneer and storyteller, brimming with artifacts and anecdotes from the Disney dynasty. And then, at the top of our current decade, the tumultuous 2020s, the Disney lineage faced the dawning challenge of balancing legacy with modernity, yet they seemed poised, ready to write the next chapter in a story where philanthropy and social conscience would take center stage. In the last few years, the Disney dynasty has swapped the boardroom for the higher calling of philanthropy, with the familial posterity embracing social advocacy over corporate intrigue. Steering this shift is the Roy and Patricia Disney Family Foundation, a beacon of social change and environmental stewardship, guided by Susan Disney and her cohort of siblings. This altruistic vessel has welcomed aboard the next generation, Olivia and Charlotte, daughters of Abigail Disney, who now lend their voices to the directorial chorus. Now their mother, the indomitable Abigail, and heiress to the Disney throne not by executive seat but by spirit, wields her clout as a documentary film producer, a social crusader, and not least a shareholder of the storied Disney company. She's become a gadfly to the Goliath, unabashedly scolding the whopping $66 million paycheck of ex-CEO Bob Iger back in 2019. But her campaign is vast, not stopping at the bulging wallets of Disney's upper echelon. Her documentary, The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales, pulls back the curtain on the disparities within the House of Mouse itself, while her environmental fervor found her in handcuffs during an anti-private jet sit-in, a bold move for climate change. Additionally, in the creative trenches with her are siblings Susan Disney Lord and Tim Disney, the latter donning the producer's hat alongside her. Since their father, Roy E. Disney, vacated the board in 2003, the Disney family has eschewed the levers of power within the empire. As for the Disney treasure trove, its exact magnitude is a well-guarded secret, with whispers suggesting the family holds a modest sub-3% of the corporate cash. A glance at the ledger shows Disney's command under the aegis of various non-Disney executives, a corporate mosaic distinct from the founder's bloodline. And so, the Disney narrative continues, with the latest chapter inked not in the boardroom minutes, but in the ledger of social impact and the heartfelt efforts of a family dedicated to a legacy of giving. And now we'd like to see you in the comments. Do you believe that it's a good or a bad thing that the Disney family no longer has a direct hand in the creative direction of the company? We're sure you'll have some thoughtful insights in the community below, and as always, thanks for your continued viewership with us here at Old Money Luxury. We'll see you next time, and until then, cheers.